Good afternoon, everyone. Father Adam can't be with us today. He's got General Synod business down in London. And Father Val Haynes from Skelton, who was coming, is obviously being held up somewhere. So if we can just spend a moment just thinking about our proceedings today and to ask for God's blessing and all that we do, say, and the business we carry out in here this afternoon. Thank you very much. Can I just ask before we start our meeting that if you have a mobile phone, can you make sure it's switched on to silent or switched off, please? First item of business are apologies for absence. We have Councillor Higgins and Smith, Councillors Carol Jeffrey, Graham Jeffrey, and Councillor Griffiths. Are there any other apologies?
Smassy is caught up on the roundabout, I think.
Okay.
Nothing to do with me. Councillors Wright, Harding, and Nightingale times 2.
Okay, thank you. The item 2 declarations in interest forms are going round if members wish to sign them. Item 3, confirm the minutes of our last meeting on the 11th of October. Could I have a proposer, please?
Yeah, can I move those minutes, please, Mr. Bear?
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dick. All in favour? Thank you. Item 4 is to receive announcements from the Mayor, Leader and Cabinet members. I have a few announcements I would like to quickly make. First of all, I would like to thank the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Steve Kay, and his partner Chris for deputising for Honor and myself while I was in hospital over the last month. I'm very grateful to Councillor Kay and to Chris for attending quite a number of functions on our behalf. Secondly, to announce that Mrs. Joanna Ropener has been appointed as the Lord Lieutenant of North Yorkshire to replace the late Barry Dodd, who was so tragically killed earlier this year. The new Lord Lieutenant was designated to attend the Remembrance Day service here in Redcar as Deputy Lord Lieutenant. She was appointed on the Tuesday before the Remembrance Day service, and it is customary for Lord Lieutenants to attend remembrance services in York Minster. Mrs. Ropener stood by her guns and said, I was appointed to come to Redcar I will go. I congratulated her when I met her on the Sunday morning on her appointment, thanked her for coming along to Redcar, which was her first official engagement, and thanked her again when I found out that she'd actually taken the trouble to book the Trend and come to Redcar and not to York Minster. On Sunday the 2nd of December, I will be holding a carol service at 3 p.m. in St Leonard's Church in Loftus. I would welcome as many people who are able to come along and attend that service to come along. I hope to see you there. Following this meeting today, the lights on the Christmas tree outside this building will be switched on. There will be festive refreshments available. We are due to switch on at 5:30, but I think depending on how long the meeting takes, if we are fortunate enough to finish a little bit earlier, then the switching on might take place a little bit earlier, but the refreshments will be available outside the council chamber prior to and after that. And then following that at 6:30, the main lights in Redcar High Street at the clock tower will be switched on. I understand there's entertainment already down there. We hope the weather improves a little bit from what it is now. So if anyone would like to come along to those two events, be very welcome to do so. I'd love to see you there. Can I ask the leader if she has any announcements or updates?
Yeah,
please?
thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, few things to say today. First of all, I just want to update you on a couple of lobbying activities that have been going on. You'll be aware that we have been contacting government ministers both around the repayment of business rates and universal credit. So just to give you the latest on both of those. First of all, in relation to business rates, we attended, myself, Anna Turley as the Redcar MP, and the Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland MP, attended a meeting with Rishi Sunak, who is the local government minister, basically to request that they reconsider their proposal to take money off us for business rates that they say we collected from GDF Suez. This was an amount of money that was collected some years ago, but has only recently come to light because of a revaluation, and really is, in summary, a case of them asking us to pay back money that we've never paid in the first case, which is absolutely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. So we all traipsed off down to London. Some of us were already there, but others weren't. And John and his colleague came with a very well thought through case. But unfortunately, despite the very best efforts of our officers to try and make government see sense, we were just met with a rules are rules and you'll have to pay up response, which was very, very disappointing. And as a result of that, we are, well, the people of Redcar and Cleveland are £1 million worse off. And I think that is reprehensible, to say the least, and it's really very disappointing that despite the very best case that we put forward, government was unable to listen to that. The second bit of lobbying we've been doing, and this has been cross-party, has been on universal credit. And we've been calling on the now departed Minister of State, I have to say, Esther McVeigh, to delay the rollout of universal credit because of the impact over Christmas that it might have on new claimants. I have to say that we have had no answer whatsoever to the 3 letters that we have written, not one single reply. As a result, the Chief Executive has made inquiries separately with senior DWP officials to try and see if we could make any progress through that route. Sadly, that wasn't very helpful either, because officials were in a situation where the rollout nationally is as it is, and if any bit of it were to change, it would impact on the whole country, apparently, and therefore common sense, it seems, is not able to prevail in this instance either. So, again, it's a case of rules being in place, and we aren't able to make any changes to that, regardless to the common sense of the proposal that we're putting forward. However, I don't know about you, but I certainly am not prepared to see any resident in this borough go over the Christmas period without access to funding, however small that risk might be. So we are going to make our own arrangements to ensure that no resident is left without cash over Christmas, and you'll find in front of you a briefing note on universal credit Christmas support that sets out how we will provide that support. And what that means is that we will make sure that there is full access to our emergency social fund over Christmas and the New Year, including on the bank holidays, so Christmas Day, New Year's Day and Boxing Day. And we will make sure that that is available. And I think, you know, it's only the right thing that we should do. Additionally, the council will be, as it always does, be collecting both for food banks and I think a toy bank as well, is that correct? Yes, food bank and a toy bank. So if anybody wants to bring anything in, any donations, staff will be asked to donate as well. Please can you do that, and we will make sure that our food banks right around the borough are as fully stocked as they possibly can be. And Councillor Hollyoak there has also got some sanitary products that she's going to donate to the food bank. And again, this is another area where we passed a resolution recently, and that sort of donation to the food bank of toiletries and sanitary products are really, really important. So on them, oh, and there are more up there as well. Councillor McCauley's got one as well. Thank you. So thank you for those. Thank you. What else? Oh yeah, next one, slightly different issue. Inspiring Women Awards. You'll be aware now that we have been running the Inspiring Women Awards for 3 years. So next year will be our 4th year. We've had some absolutely excellent winners over the last 3 years. The last one last year was Melanie Hennessy, who she got the award for her charity work, raising money for brain tumour research, whilst living with the effects of 3 brain tumours herself. So you can see from that the calibre of the people and names we have put forward. We're again seeking nominations, and details of where the nominations can be made will be sent out to you. There is this year a new award, and the new award is for is to recognise community groups making a difference in the borough. So it's the Community Group Contribution Award. So there's a new category. So again, I would say to everybody, if you know any woman who you feel is appropriate to nominate for these awards, please do that, because it gives them some recognition for all the work that they may be out doing either in business or in the community, or indeed in any other walk of life. So that's the Inspiring Women Awards. Finally, Mr. Mayor, just two final things I just want to mention. The first, that they are both examples of the brilliant work that our staff and councillors do all the time. And these two just happened to be last night, so that's why I'm referring to them. But I know lots and lots of people do lots of stuff all the time. But last night, and Craig may have been going to mention this anyway, I was at the Looked After Children Awards, and they were absolutely fabulous as always. And it was really great to see so many of our foster families present with their children receiving awards. And again, it just shows what great work we do working with those people who give their time to support some of our most vulnerable children. And then secondly, I went from that to the Fork in the Road restaurant in Middlesbrough. And you'd might say, well, that wasn't much of a chore then, was it? Well, I actually have to say it wasn't, no. But what I was doing there was our Transformational Challenge team actually took over the restaurant for the evening, and they were doing all the waiting on and other stuff. They weren't cooking the food, but they were doing everything else. And they were raising money for Eva Women's Aid, The Junction, and CEO Sleep Out, and Lynn was there as well. And they actually managed to raise £2,699.52, which I think is absolutely excellent. So well done to them. So that's it, I think. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jeffrey? Announcements from...
Universal credit. But there's no direct telephone number. It does say, for example, on the back, go on the website. I don't know if you've ever actually navigated our website there. It's absolutely shambolic. I wonder if we could have some kind of direct either telephone number or email, please, that we could be given via email so that we can give it to our constituents if anybody does want to claim it, because asking them to phone perhaps the contact centre or via the email on the contact centre, I don't think is perhaps good enough if we can do it direct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry about the interruption.
Just to say that all the emergency numbers for over Christmas will be available, and that will give you the details of how to get through and how you can make sure that your residents are supported in that way. So that will be available. This was just a summary of what's available. Okay.
Okay, pass on to announcements and cabinet members. I understand Councillor Hannaway, you wish to say something.
Sorry? No, it's all right, you haven't pinched it. I'm going to mention it later. Could I just congratulate St Bede's Primary School in Mask, which has been, according to the Sunday Times, is the best primary school in the country. which is an amazing title to have. We're not entirely sure about the judging criteria, but it seems to be a combination of SATS results, Ofsted reports, the ethos of the school, and the community engagement of the school as well. So congratulations to Joanna Wilson, the head at St. Bede's, and to all of the pupils, the parents, the governors, and the staff of the school.
Thank you, Councillor Hanaway. Any other announcements from Cabinet members? Okay, thank you. Item 5, do we save any announcements from the Chief Executive?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to advise members about some senior appointments. I recently wrote to you and advised you that Sarah Robson had been appointed to the new role of Corporate Director for Growth, Enterprise and Environment. And just to confirm that Sarah will be starting with us on the 1st of February. We've also just appointed Victoria Wilson as Assistant Director for Adult Care. That was a member appointment earlier this week, so congratulations to Victoria. And finally, the Tees Valley Combined Authority made an appointment yesterday to their Chief Executive's post, and that too went to a woman, Julie Gillespie, and congratulations to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no questions from the public. We move on to item 7, reports from Cabinet and Council committees. 7A, Councillor Norton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's good to see you in that chair after your little spell in hospital. We wish you well. Mr. Mayor, I present to the Chamber this afternoon the Gambling Act Statement of Principles, which we as a council have to review every 3 years in accordance with the statute, or less if we deem it necessary, and which this council only can endorse. It's not something that can be delegated to a cabinet member. I reported in Cabinet, Mr. Mayor, that the application for new licences in respect of bingo halls, family entertainment centres and betting offices had seen a slight reduction in recent years. The only rise in application for gaming licences was around casinos. I then asked Cabinet to endorse the exploration by officers of adopting a no casino resolution with this authority, which is available to us under this Act, and that they did. Gambling is a huge problem in this country as it seeks to exploit the vulnerable in our society and those who can least afford it. As the report says, in 2015 a health survey revealed in England alone that 370,000 people were suffering from problems in relation to gambling. And only yesterday the Gambling Commission produced a report, Young People and Gambling. And if ever you want a reality check, then this is a document worth reading. I'm not going to read the whole thing out to you. We'll be here for a lot longer than your Christmas lights being turned on, Mr. Mayor. In fact, we might need them. But what it says, and a couple of points which I think help focus the mind. The most prevalent forms of gambling in the past week, and this is as recent as this week, are fruit machines 4%, private bets with friends 3%, and national lottery scratch cards. And this survey is based around 11 to 16-year-olds, none of whom are legally qualified to gamble. The Gambling Commission study suggests that 450,000 children aged 11 to 16 bet regularly, more than those who have taken drugs, smoked, or drunk alcohol. So if that helps us get us into proportion, then it surely does. In the new standard, we've introduced local area profiling, and what essentially that does, it means when you're applying for a new license, you have to undertake a local area profile that sets out who in effect is around you, whether it's a school, whether it's people that are suffering from deprivation or whatever. And you have to include that in your local area profile assessment when you submit it with your licence. This authority has gone slightly ahead of that game in the sense that we have provided or about to provide an interactive tool where anybody applying for a licence can go online, use that interactive tool and be able to see around them those areas that we consider are at risk. It was interesting, was it not, that we all got involved in one way or another in the consultation about fixed odds betting terminals and the reduction of the stake from £100 to 2. And I'm delighted to say that the government took that on board and said that they would indeed bring that reduction in stake about, and said that it would bring it in April. And then the government did one of its famous U-turns, didn't it? Because they said in the budget speech, no, we'll bring that in October. Well, good for Tracy Crouch. She said, no chance, I'm off. It's a matter of principle, and I'm not taking on this job without you agree to what I ask for. Well, I, in Cabinet, said that I should write to the Minister, the new Minister, and say to him that we should bring this back to its original timeline and put it back in on April. The ink had barely dried on the paper when the U-turn was announced. And so I'm pleased to say that the fixed odds betting terminal reduction in stake will come back to its original timeline of April. The power of the pen, they say, or the might, I know not. But, Councillor Turner, if you would like me to write on behalf of Simon Clarke and ask Theresa May to resign, she may take more notice of my writing, because she's certainly not taking any notice of his. So, Mr Mayor, I put this report to Council for them to adopt as our statement of principles for the Gambling Act.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. Could I have a seconder, please, for the...
Yeah, I'll second that, please.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor Jeffrey? Yeah, there was nothing on the screen. That was... Yeah, you're there now.
Sorry. It's been a long meeting. Just to add to actually what Councillor Norton has actually said, I too hesitate to rush to pay credit to particularly Tory ministers, but in the instance of Tracy Crouch, I think all credit is due to her. It isn't often you actually see a minister of the Crown resign over an issue, but she did the right thing under the circumstances from her own perspective. But she also made the point, did she not, Councillor Norton, that if the elimination of FOBTs from gaming establishments was held over until September of next year, there was the potential for 300 additional people to commit suicide in that time because of the despondency they faced after being driven into debt by gambling on these machines. And just to remind you all, you can actually spend £100 in 20 seconds. The maximum you can spend is over a minute, and that's £300 in that period of time. So they clearly are a danger to people who have any sort of addiction to gambling. I mean, I would argue the U-turn is welcome, but why not bring it in now? There's absolutely no reason at all why it can't be enacted. If you were cynical about these things, you would say that's been down to the gambling lobby itself, which has been working hard to keep the £100 a minute in, and at the same time threatening the government that if it was introduced at all, some 20,000 jobs would be lost. There's no evidence to suggest that that would actually occur. In fact, one individual employed by the gambling industry is actually on a very good wage, because there was on last night's news, the head or the boss of Bet365 picked up £265 million last year, which is a pretty good wage from anybody's perspective. So the crocodile tears about lost jobs, I would suggest are just that. The London Borough of Newham has established a track record for itself in incorporating gambling controls into its local plan. And I'd like to suggest, given the opportunity, that's something perhaps this council would need to look at. They've also, in their research, identified the fact that the gambling industry focuses on poor areas. Now, we all know in this room that's not true, don't we? No, we don't, because that's exactly what they do, but the gambling industry claims to go the opposite way. And quite cynically, of course, the gambling industry, whilst it's limited to a maximum of 2 of these machines in one establishment, just builds more establishments so they can get more machines in the same high street. That's their way of getting around that. So I say, no reason why it shouldn't come in immediately. And a final point, if I may, Chair, we are, and Bob pointed out the terrible statistics about children that are gambling. We have an obligation, it seems to me, to protect children from the forces of advertising. And can I say, as a long-time season ticket holder, it appalls me every time I go to a Middlesbrough home match to see the players running around with some betting establishment on the front of the shirts. I can't recall which one it is, there's that many. Whilst at the same time, and if you miss the players, you'll see the constant advertising of all the other gambling institutions in the country along the circuit, the digital circuit boards that are in front of the children for a full 2-hour period. I think, Councillor Norton, we should be dropping a line to Mr Gibson and asking him to look for a more socially acceptable sponsor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Eyre, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. While supporting there with Councillor Ian Jeffrey there that has just given out of the chamber, and also supporting there the recommendation there that is before the chamber. Just going back to the children and the horrific numbers there that Councillor Norton put forward. But my main concern, it's not the high street betting shops where local authorities and government there can have some control over. It's the offshore online gambling where local authorities don't have any say, they don't have any control, and the government has very little control. Yet, we go onto our TV, the sports channels, they are absolutely flooded with the different betting organisations, and they're all offshore. What control have they got? How do they know betting, how old you are when you apply, you know, there to join their betting organisation? Because you've got to put your bank details forward. There's absolutely no control over that. And I think there that the government have got to step in somehow and make a way into that controlling it. I would hope there that the chamber there does support the statement. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Lanigan, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your report, Councillor Norton. I was quite shocked about, and although Councillor Eyre and everybody's been talking about online, you did mention scratch cards. The thing being about that is, that's our local shops. And that's absolutely appalling. And for the age that you've actually given out there. And so what are we doing to enforce that on the high street for scratch cards? I'm quite sure that the parents aren't going in there and buying scratch cards and giving them to the children. But if the children are going in at that age, then something needs to be done about it, and we need to enforce that. but I certainly will be supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lanigan. I have no more members wishing to speak, so I have a proposal. We have a seconder. Can we ask all those in favour of the resolution from Cabinet, please? Okay. Any against? Thank you. That is carried. Item 7B is the Looked After Children and Child Sexual Exploitation report from Councillor Hanaway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, we have reached the number of almost 300 looked after children at the end of October, 136 of them in-house foster care and 88 with independent or voluntary providers, and 21 subject to a care order, 10 in independent living, 4 in adoptive placements, 35 in residential and 4 in other placements. This is historically the highest figure we've had, and in the month of October alone, 22 new children and young people came into care, which is the highest number ever in 1 month. To give a brief comparison, Middlesbrough and Stockton have about 500 looked after children, and Middlesbrough has had to increase its investment in children's services by almost 50% in order to meet that huge extra need. Our foster care recruitment drive continues to go very well to try and meet this demand. We still have an urgent need for people, especially for those with some space who can offer care for a parent for a short break, even if it's only for 1 or 2 nights a month, particularly for the older looked after children. We've had a very positive number of inquiries recently. The fostering panel is very busy, but we continue to need to recruit. We've recently had another Skills to Foster training course, which 11 people attended. It was well received, and all of them have asked that their applications proceed to the next stage. In the Looked After Children's team, on the 4th of October, members of the unit delivered a workshop at the region's social work conference with the support of one of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We got very good feedback on the presentation. And also, as set out in the last report, the cost and scarcity of residential placements remains our greatest challenge. The service manager for Looked After Children recently met with the country's most senior family judge, Sir Andrew McFarlane, as well as Judge Matthews, the designated family judge for Teesside, to discuss these issues. And Sir Andrew said that he would raise the scarcity and cost of the placements with the Children's Commissioner for England. Moving on to the Looked After Children's Council. Our LAC Council was central to planning the Annual Achievement Awards event, which happened last night. It really was a wonderful event. It was, it's always a wonderful event, but I think it was particularly well produced. The timing was great. So I'd like to congratulate all of those children and young people who were nominated or received awards. Thank you to yourself, Mr. Mayor, for attending the event. And also thanks to Dylan Cartledge, who performed for us. Many of you will have seen him in the film The Mighty Redcar. He's a brilliant performer, and of course, as a care leaver himself, he said some very welcome and very inspiring things to the looked after children present. So thank you to all the staff who organised that, and to the LAC Council for planning it. Recently, moving on to our virtual school, recently our virtual school underwent a peer review. I was part of the review, and Councillor King was involved in that as well. And I must say I was very impressed by the knowledge and the level of experience of the peer reviewers who came to look at our own service. They looked at how effective it is, and also how well we're implementing our duties, and also what the impact of Pupil Premium Plus has been. Their initial findings were that the school is providing inspirational leadership to colleagues, that there are strong internal partnerships, and they like the additional capacity that we've recently added to the virtual school. They also gave us some things to think about as well, such as whether the school model focuses exclusively on 5 to 16-year-olds and should now be extended to include early years and also post-16. They also asked us to consider an alternative provision strategy in partnership with schools, and to think about whether we should have a governing body or a managing committee for the virtual school service itself. Section 6 is on our leaving care service. We're currently working with 118 young people leaving care, 47 of them aged 16 to 17, and 71 who have already left care. And we continue to make progress in achieving better outcomes for care leavers in key areas such as health, education, and employment. On the subject of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children social worker is now in post and developing relationships within the community to support these young people. We also marked National Care Leavers Week recently, and the end of that week was marked with a celebratory evening at Target. A local entrepreneur came to the event and spoke to the young people about his struggles and how he overcame his challenges to reach his aspirations. The Leaving Care team have also undertaken training regarding the rollout of universal credit in Redcar, and have met with job centre managers and work coaches to ensure that the care leavers who will transfer to universal credit will have the smoothest possible transition, and any emerging issues will be dealt with quickly. I have a particular fear about disabled care leavers and how they will fare in the change to universal credit. It's very important that we provide appropriate support for our care leavers to access education, employment and training, and so our young people have been given the opportunity to apply for paid employment to become a regional young ambassador with the Regional Children in Care Council, and are being helped to apply for one of those roles. And finally, our section on child sexual exploitation. At the end of October, there were 24 children and young people who we considered to be at risk of VEMT, a slight reduction on the previous month. The age range is from 12 to 17. We continue to try and improve the VEMT process to strengthen our understanding of the risks, and we're currently trying to give a more detailed VEMT definition, which evidences the primary area of concern for each young person and makes sure that they have a named member of the team to contact. At the meeting in October, the lead professional was tasked with undertaking a mapping exercise to identify the child or young person's primary peer group or any links to other VEMT children and young people in the area that they may have. We are also developing a publicity campaign which is planned to go live in January. This is to raise awareness among the public of the area of VEMT and will include posters and a social media campaign concerning VEMT issues in our communities. And as I've reported in previous reports, the taxi drivers have been doing their CSE awareness training, and I'm pleased to say that all of them have now completed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanaway. Councillor Dr. Jackson. Oh, sorry, could I have a seconder for? Thank you. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a quick point, really. Leaving Care Service 6.4, at the end of the Care Leavers Week and the celebratory evening, I noticed that in some of the comments at the bottom, one of them was, we learnt how to play bingo. Given the situation with the gambling, perhaps we should have a rethink about the games we play with the leaving care people. I'm sure we didn't take any money off them, but even so, maybe we shouldn't teach them how to play bingo.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Larrigan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hanaway, for your report. Two things. I read a report from Middlesbrough Social Services Department And of course, we are all under financial pressure with the children. They are looking at bringing in-house care if they can. The report actually went on to say that the cost of looked after children outside our boundaries, and I'm presuming that applies to Redcar and Cleveland as it does to Middlesbrough, was extremely expensive. Are we as a council working jointly with Middlesbrough to do that? And the second question I wanted to ask you, disability among our young people. I've had a case where the parent's child went on to universal credit. It's been a bit of a minefield. And given that universal credit is rolling in and it hasn't been stopped, I'm quite sure that the councillors in this chamber are going to have similar problems and they are going to multiply. We have enough work on with universal credit as it is, because people are starting to flood in now with it, and it's taken up a great deal of time in order to help with that. But my concern was for the disabilities of these young people and the parents trying to get through the minefield of this. Have we got any extra help within the council to help with that? I'm sure all the councillors are well equipped and to go forward, but the caseloads of these are becoming quite massive, and I'm quite sure that over Christmas and into the new year they're going to increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one is I'd like to thank Councillor Hannaway. Surprise. 7.6, he does mention county lines, which was a question I asked last time, but didn't get a reply. The section actually seems a bit confusing. I'm not sure if the person that wrote it really understood it. County lines were set up a year back. Areas who participated were given grants to set up centres. Because criminals cross boundaries, it was figured the people trying to stop this can cross boundaries. So drugs, sexual exploitation was not going to be dealt with by a single authority. It was going to be helped by this multi-approach, which doesn't seem to be mentioned here. I did ask last time if we'd got involved at the start and actually got some funding to set this up. I'm still not getting that question answered, so I would like to know that. The second question is again a follow-up from my query last time about the overspend of children's services. I've been helped by some information from the media. We're talking about last 12 months, not these last few months. Middlesbrough had a 1.55 million overspend over that 12 months, and they dealt with 860 referrals of care. Redcar and Cleveland have had this year an overspend of 3.5 million only in 6 months, and referrals of 490.6. So it's almost half the money and nearly, well, just over twice the expenditure. Again, we keep asking. I understood John Sampson was looking into this. We've heard nothing in the opposition from John. I would like some explanation about the figures.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your report, Councillor Hannaway. It's more of a comment really on 6.4. I did attend the Care Leavers celebration night, which was absolutely fantastic. On Councillor Dr. Jackson's point, I think we can't avoid our children bingos out there. I think what we can do is expose them to things like that, but teach them responsible, and there are ways of having fun without spending money. But I do take your point about it is normally gambling, but the children loved it so much, and and they get things like toiletries and things, the ones that are living on their own, that they wouldn't normally get as prizes rather than alcohol or anything. But I really just want to applaud the efforts of the Target and the Leaving Care team, because that night was absolutely fantastic, and the best thing about it was how all of the care leavers integrated, including the care leavers that have not been living in this country very long. It's one big happy family. Everyone gets on, everyone integrates, everyone chats to each other, and I think them young people are a total credit to our borough and can teach a lot of other people things about the way they behave, the way they're very accepting, and the way they're very tolerant of each other. So that's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I could probably comment on every aspect of this, and I think we do a great job at looking after our looked after children, and we know there are going to be increasing pressures regardless of what budget we set aside, because the need to take children into care is going to be there forever, neglect being top of the pile. I did want to refer to 5.4, which is about the headline areas for consideration under the virtual school head. I think this is a key thing for getting a good future for our looked after children, to have their best education interests, and starting earlier, prior to age 5, and following it through onto their post-16. I hope that is given due consideration and actually happens. I'll be very supportive of that approach, because it also includes those people who have special placements where we still have responsibilities and not always just in our schools. They're in special settings, and yet we still have those duties to be doing our very, very best for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Ian Jeffrey, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, just over 1 now in every 100 children in this authority are looked after by the local authority. Just thought I'd remind you of that statistic. And next Wednesday, we get the arguable benefits of universal credit being rolled out in this and many other authorities up and down the country. And as alluded to by Councillor Hannaway, and I hope you know that his fears proved to be unjustified. And whilst I welcome the earlier statement about the arrangements for the Christmas period, everyone must acknowledge that there's no alternative to stopping this rollout and coming back with something a bit more meaningful for people that find themselves in difficult situations. Earlier this week, the Daily Mirror ran a feature on universal credit, specifically on the numbers of women in rollout areas resorting to prostitution to feed their families. We know in areas where it's rolled out, shoplifting continues to increase. Hartlepool is the closest local example, and we're no different here now, incidentally. And referrals to food banks have escalated, well over 50% in some areas, according to the Trussell Trust, where the rollout has occurred. The leader alluded to the letters that have received no replies yet. Of course, they won't come, if they come, from Esther McVeigh, because in the roundabout that is the government minister job circus, she's been replaced by, I believe it's Amber Rudd, who's only taken 7 months to be rehabilitated. And of course, we all remember she presided over the so-called Windrush generation scandal. So I wouldn't anticipate any soft-nosed approach from that particular individual. We know the local Labour MP was on board, Anna Turley. We know, to his very great credit, in a personal capacity, so was the leader of the Conservative group on this council, Philip Thompson. So that makes it a bit difficult, I would imagine, for the local Tory to attack this council on its views, I would suggest, on the issue. And what did the Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland Tory MP do in reaction to the council's initiative? Well, he got a few people together from the benefit office and got them to say what a wonderful thing universal credit was. And you might be interested in the response of the the regional secretary of the PCS union, the Public and Commercial Services Union. He says, in relation to the MP Simon Clark's Facebook video on how wonderful UC is, my colleagues in the branch covering our area feel strongly that the job centre staff appearing in the video do not work on the front line delivering the benefit, and that the experience of ordinary staff is very different. The PCS supports the Labour Party position of pausing further rollout until this highly flawed benefit system is fixed. We have made several submissions to this effect to the Social Security Select Committee, as well as to other inquiries. Perhaps Councillor Turner would like to return or refer those sentiments to his employer. And just a final comment, if I may, Chair, and it's on another report that's come out in the last week or so, and that's from a guy called Philip Alston, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, who's the United Nations envoy and has conducted a report on poverty in Britain. Like the last time he appeared in this country, sadly, though, the government's reaction was to dismiss it as some sort of Marxist plot. But he introduces his report by saying the UK government is in a state of denial about the impact of austerity policies on the poor. He actually says that they have adopted a callous approach, particularly, he points out, in that any children in a family above the number of 2 do not receive child benefit, to the detriment not only to that family, but to the child. Universal credit, he says, is fast falling into universal discredit, and the changes to tax and benefits have taken the highest toll on those least able to bear it.
Could you sum up, please, Councillor Jeffrey?
He complains about the lack of a safety net for people and points out the poverty statistics which even the DWP do not dispute. 14 million people in poverty, nearly a quarter of the population, and that includes 4 million children, and that's projected to rise to 5 million by 2020, and of that number, 1.5 living in destitution. The 5th richest country in the world. And what are you people doing about it?
Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, for your political statement. That didn't seem to have much to do with Councillor Hanaway's report. As you were very courteous on this occasion about my boss, I will pass on your comments to him. Thank you very much. My question for Councillor Hanaway relates to 6.2. As we are regularly told, we have financial pressures in our looked after children's team. Can you just confirm for me that despite these financial pressures, we're actively seeking to bring 2 children from outside of the area into our area to be looked after? And if that is the case, how much is that going to cost us, please?
Councillor Turner. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't stand here to defend any particular minister. However, I think it is well known that the background of Amber Rudd was, in her previous position as Home Secretary, not well advised. It is on public record that the information that she was given was not correct, and that the support that was in her department did not advise her. So I think we should be giving her every encouragement in her new position. Now, looked after children. Whatever measures are being taken do not seem to be adequate enough to address the ever-increasing numbers of looked after children that we hear about on a regular basis. The complexity surrounding those looked after children also seems to increase. So I have 2 particular points to make in this very comprehensive report. Comprehensive in the attempts to portray a picture that we should all be conscious of in understanding the complexity of the nature. So when we're talking about the biggest challenge that we have, which is the creation of and provision of residential placement. I want to say, are we failing in addressing this? So we've talked to family judges. Good. We've asked for messages to be passed on to Children's Commissioner. Good. But what are we actually doing about it as an authority? So there may be measures that we're taking that I'm not privy to. If so, please advise me. But I do think we ought to be saying, if there are specific needs that we cannot, as an authority, address, which is the provision of residential placements, we should be taking that initiative and leading either on our own or with colleagues to address this demand. Now, any demand usually comes with a financial caveat. So be it. So if children in care is one of our aspirations to address to the best of our ability, are we conducting ourselves to the best of our ability? It doesn't sound like that to me. Therefore, what I would request is that with a degree of urgency, we look again, if we have already looked, which apparently we have, at provision of residential care for those we send elsewhere. Send may be a pejorative word. It doesn't help the individual. So I ask that that be done as a matter of urgency. If funding is needed, let's find the funding. I don't want to hear about cuts. I don't want to hear about shortages. I don't want to hear about reallocation of budget and finding money from somewhere else. Let's be clear about our priorities as a council. So please follow that up. Now, if we are having more children in care, what's the net result of that? There's more children leaving care. We are doing tremendous work in addressing their needs. But of course, we're hearing about the complexity of the requirements of those people currently in care.
Could you start to sum up, please, Councillor Thompson?
Therefore, thank you, Mayor. Therefore, we should be making sure the provision we are providing for those people who support in aftercare, for leaving care, is also there. So I add that to our list.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I do feel that we're skimming over the surface, rather. We talk all the time about spending more money. In fact, we have spent more money on this particular problem. And I agree the money should be spent. But this is a deeper problem than just numbers and money. And no doubt the numbers will increase. They've doubled in 4 years, they're going to double again in the next 4 years, most likely. And the reason for this is because, in my opinion, that society is changing, and the cement and glue that used to hold families together, like the collapse of the extended family network, for example, with people having nuclear families with no family support, matters like that. Plus, and I've made a list, things that are helping to cause this particular problem. Most of these, if not all, are on the increase. Alcoholism, drugs, gambling, which we've mentioned, social media, which you may think is innocuous. Some people are glued to their devices every minute of the day. Family breakdown, which probably is caused by people being glued to the devices to some extent. Lack of socialisation. You know, families and children don't gel together as perhaps they should do. Poverty, which has also been mentioned. Poor housing. We have atrocious housing in this country, particularly in the city centres and on some of the estates. You know, what chance do kids have? And also, I would contend that over the last few decades, there's been too much reliance on the state. The state certainly should intervene and be a safety net, but the attitude has developed whereby people think, oh, any problems I get with my kids, the state will provide. And of course, the parents should take that responsibility wherever possible on themselves. It can be difficult, but we mustn't take the state or this council for granted.
Thank you. Before I ask Councillor Hannaway to respond, can I just say, on a personal basis, Mayoress and myself were delighted to attend the Looked After Children Achievement Awards last night. We found it a most humbling experience. I read Councillor Hannaway's reports. I've looked at the numbers of Looked After Children, and okay, there are approaching 300 children with major problems. But last night we heard there's 14 awards given, but behind those awards, behind the winners, were an awful lot of nominees who were also major achievers. And I suspect behind even those nominees, there are young people who are still working to get to that level, are responding. And I think a huge vote of thanks and congratulations should go to Barbara Shaw and her colleagues for the support, encouragement and professionalism that they show, because I'm sure they work far beyond the call of duty to provide that support, initially to the carers who work 24 hours a day in supporting children in their homes, in giving that love and care that they need. But most of all, to those young people, some of them last night as young as, 6, 7 years old, coming up for awards. They've suffered tremendous traumas in their lives, traumas that no young person in a civilized society should ever, ever have to face. And their response to the encouragement and support that they are given was tremendous. Their problems are probably not over, but they are positively responding, and that was shown. I don't consider myself particularly emotional, but last night I had a lump in my throat and tears in my eyes. I found it such a moving experience, and congratulations to everyone involved, and particularly the young people who respond positively to what we are trying to achieve. Councillor Hannaway, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you very much for those comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. That was a very moving speech. Thank you. Councillor Jackson, I don't want to stop them playing bingo. I don't want to stop the care leavers playing. If I stop them playing bingo, the next thing is the Deputy Mayor will be in the Gazette next to a bingo machine, you know, and he'll be calling me a killjoy. So I'd rather not, if you don't mind, stop them doing that. Councillor Lanigan, the cost of looked after children, the placements are, as you rightly say, extremely expensive. And you ask if we're working with Middlesbrough. We're working with all of the local authorities, particularly with Middlesbrough. We are planning a safeguarding and early help hub, a joint hub, a children's hub for us and Middlesbrough. There'll be a cabinet report coming on that soon. And we believe that will be a very useful thing to have. It means that children's referrals will come into one place where we and the police and the other services will all be there. And hopefully that will also help with resources as well. I share your concern also about disabled people and universal credit, which is why I mentioned it, particularly in the light of articles like this, which was in the Sunday Times, about a girl born brain damaged who faces losing her home because of benefit cuts. She was brain damaged after her mother contracted the human form of mad cow disease. She lives with a grandmother who says Emily can't speak or eat. We feed her using a syringe to pump food into her stomach via a tube. She is doubly incontinent and can't walk. As I told the Universal Credit officials, despite such warnings, staff from the Department for Work and Pensions made Emily attend a work capability assessment, and the result of that was that she lost more than half her benefits under Universal Credit. So you're right to bring that up. That's very worrying and, as you say, very callous. Councillor Watts, apologies, I meant to answer your question during the report. I only got the full answer to it this week, which is that neither we nor the police have any extra funding at all, county lines from the scheme that you mentioned. You talk about overspending, and you wanted an answer on that. There'll be fuller financial information in the next cabinet, but just off the top of my head, the larger picture about the difference between us and Middlesbrough is that Middlesbrough have increased their investment in children's services by, I think, 46%, as opposed to around 8-9% here. So when you talk about the overspend, I think you need to see it in that larger picture. Councillor King, thank you very much for your comments. Councillor Ovens, yes, I'm also pleased we're extending it to post-16, the virtual service. Obviously, it is a developing service for us. And one of the good things about having the peer review is that you get wisdom from other areas as well. So I think it was very worth doing it, and I think our virtual school head gave a very good account of himself in that peer review. Thank you for those comments as well, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Turner, the two young people, in terms of the costs, there is a tariff, and the tariff is based on the tariff for other looked after children, and so it really doesn't cover all of our costs, unfortunately. But with those two in particular, I've received an update since the report was written, and they've decided not to come here. They didn't want to come up north. So those particular two young people won't be joining us. Councillor Thompson, I think saying find the money from somewhere is not the most helpful comment I've heard in the light of the cuts that you don't want to hear about. And I think in saying that we're not conducting ourselves properly, you've managed to insult all of the staff in children's services. Well done. The residential placements. Yeah, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of the lack of regional placements, the Home Office funding for those placements has been reduced by 50% in recent years due to austerity. Sorry about telling you about more cuts, which means that the places are massively reduced. We are currently talking to a company which runs a residential service in Stockton about the possibility of them running part of our residential service here. The difficulties are, you talked about the caveats. As we know, it does create a lot of what we might call political difficulty in terms of residents not wanting to have residential homes in their locality. So for each new home that we open, we would obviously have that difficulty. It's an idea that we're exploring, but you can see for example, the recent tragedy that happened in a home in Gisborough. If that had been a home that we were running as a council, we would obviously be in a very difficult situation. We're not against that idea of running our homes, but it needs to be explored carefully. We also hope that our new model signs of safety will hopefully alleviate some of the pressure, particularly with the older looked after children who are perhaps on the edge of needing residential care, and will help us to, as it has in some other areas, to keep them with their families. So it will be a better outcome for them, as well as financially better for us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We please now have a show of hands for those who wish to accept the report. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Next item is to receive reports from portfolio holders. Councillor Pallister, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be my last report to full council as Cabinet Member for Health, Housing and Welfare. In my previous reports, I have covered the whole of the Health and Housing and Welfare Directorate. However, this year I did want to focus on some key areas. I appreciate members may want to ask questions on information not included within the report, and I'm happy to try and answer questions either today or, if I can't, at a later date. Members will see we are delivering some innovative public health programmes that have attracted attention nationally. In partnership with Middlesbrough, we are the first council in the councils in the North East and one of only a few nationally to establish a joint public health service with Middlesbrough, now rebranded Live Well South Tees. This time next week, we'll see the rollout of universal credit. Most people would agree the principle of replacing 6 benefits into a combined single payment, making work pay, and even having online claim processes is great if you have access to a computer and you are computer literate. But for some of our most vulnerable residents, universal credit could and will cause severe hardship. We are being proactive at how we best mitigate the impact of the new universal credit claimants. The leader has already announced what we will be doing for those that don't receive a payment over Christmas. And to date, we have trained 106 staff and elected members in the council, and that was delivered by the Department for Work and Pensions. And some of the advice that we were given was who would be affected by universal credit and who is not, who can claim housing benefit and who should claim universal credit, the council response in terms of how we can help people, digital support, personal budgeting support, signposting, advice for claim assessment queries. In addition to the training, a communications campaign is to be launched to increase the awareness of the forthcoming changes and the support which is available. In view of the timing of the implementation, as I've said, it's going to be over Christmas period, we have a universal credit hotline, and it is envisioned that the hotline will assist minimising hardship through directing people to support and making arrangements for advance payments when services would usually be shut down. We have jointly procured a new community bank. The community bank will offer a suite of banking products including loans, saving accounts, current accounts, online banking and a mobile application for accessing loans. Staff who will be working in the new community bank have also experienced universal credit, which has been already implemented in Newcastle. While the branch for the borough will be based in Redcar Town Centre, it is very much the intention of the community bank to serve all communities across the borough and South Tees. Arrangements are being made for the community development officer employed by Moneywise to attend team meetings and work with community development teams from across the Adult and Communities Directorate. It is envisaged that this will better assist them into integrating into communities and provide financial support as and where needed. It is also the intention to explore the possibility of community collection points where viable and appropriate. It is also noted that South Bank Savings and Credit Union continue to operate successfully across the borough. The new South Tees Community Bank will very much seek to complement the South Bank offer, providing different options for residents. We're holding a debt cadet conference next Friday, the 30th of November, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at tuned in. I hope members will attend. This year we've made significant progress in improving outcomes for our local population. There's been a continued decline in prevalence of smoking amongst adults. Smoking prevalence in adults has reduced from 19.3% in 2011 to 12.4% in 2017. Our breastfeeding rates continue to improve. Suicide rates are showing a promising declining trend. There were 34 suicides in Redcar and Cleveland between 2015 to 17, compared to 41 between 2014 to 16. Cervical cancer screening rates continue to improve, bucking the national trend. We have a final report on the work of the cross-party private sector housing group and have carried out some proactive work to tackle the issues within the private rented sector in Carlinau. In April this year, we merged the Council's Health Improvement, Community Development Team, External Funding Officer and Transformational Challenge Team to create the Empowering Communities Team. The report shows examples of the excellent work the Empowering Communities teams are delivering to improve people's health and well-being, and to encourage and support communities to build capacity and help themselves. I'd like to pay special thanks to all the hundreds of volunteers, from sports coaches, community health champions, those who help in our community centres, at community events, dementia-friendly champions, and many more individuals and community groups across the borough who contribute so much to making this borough a healthier and better place to live. I'd like to move on now to the the public health budget. Members will see from the table in 2.3 that since the transfer of public health from the NHS to local authorities in April 2013, the public health grant has reduced from 10.62 million in 2013-14 to 8.985 million by 2019-20. There is also uncertainty on the future funding arrangements for public health from 2020, with proposals that the future public health grant be derived from business rates retention. These early proposals, if implemented, would result in a 3.3 million reduction for Redcar and Cleveland, leaving the remaining public health budget reduced further to 5.685 million. While I welcome the recent announcement in the Chancellor's autumn statement that additional funding has been found for the NHS, 20 billion and 2 billion into mental health, it was disappointing that there was no additional funding for prevention. And the cost to treat ill health is 97 billion and the cost to prevent ill health is 8 billion. It was also welcome to hear the new Secretary for Health and Social Care, Matt Hancock, saying that he believes prevention is better than cure and that we must support people to make better lifestyle choices. And so I ask this council, in this council chamber today, that the leader of the Conservative group, Councillor Philip Thompson, along with myself as Cabinet Member for Public Health, write a letter to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care asking that he now turns them words into action and urgently puts more investment into public health. Councillor Thompson asked a question about what are we doing about residential placements, and we've heard about the cost today. We put more into public health prevention in terms of mental health, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic abuse. We may prevent many more children actually going into residential care. Page 3, paragraph 3.4 sets out some of the services we are delivering to prevent, treat and offer long-term support to those with drug, alcohol addictions and their carers. However, we continue to see a rise in drug use and drug-related deaths. In Redcar, there was 37 drug-related deaths between 2015 and 2017. 28 of these were male and 9 female. Between 2012 and 2014, there were 9 deaths, and in 2011, there were 6. So we can see how this is continuing to be a huge problem in terms of people dying because of drugs. Redcar in Cleveland has a higher prevalence of opiate and crack cocaine use, with an estimated 14.3% per 1,000 population compared to 8.6 nationally. The rate of alcohol-related hospital admissions is higher locally, with 2,771 per 100,000 in 2016-17, compared to 2,185 nationally. Successful treatment...
Can I ask you to start summing up, please, Councillor Pallister?
I'll try and be quick. Successful completions of drug treatment for opiate users is also lower at 4.6 compared to 6.5 nationally. Not only are we seeing an increase in drug deaths, but many drug users suffer with long-term health conditions. And it's not only the drug users themselves who suffer, but their families. We currently have 1,210 children raised by relatives because parents are unable to care for them, most commonly due to domestic abuse, drug and alcohol misuse. We see the increases in violent crime, theft, house burglaries, antisocial behaviour, all related to drugs, notwithstanding the cost to the NHS, public health, criminal justice system, police, housing. I'm pleased the new police and crime plan will place an emphasis on drugs. A conference held on September the 3rd of this year was to discuss a groundbreaking initiative aimed at helping hardcore drug addicts turn their life around. The pilot heroin-assisted treatment scheme will provide supervised injection facility and enhanced wraparound support 7 days a week. There's growing public support for a different approach to the drugs policy. It is now time to have a serious adult debate about this country's current drug strategy or lack of one. Can I just move on to mental health?
Can I ask you to finish there, Councillor Pallister, because you're well over to your 10 minutes.
Right, okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Questions from members. Can I ask members to be as succinct and brief as possible? There are a number of members wanting to ask questions. Councillor Walsh, please.
Thank you. I think this afternoon we've been dealing with reports that, in a sense, are as grey and as gloomy as the weather outside. You know, we're talking about austerity, we're talking about ill health, we're talking about breakdown in families leading to child care and potential child exploitation, and we're talking about universal credit and the impact that has. In this report, and I think it's a fascinating report because in a sense it codifies a lot of the issues that we've been talking about. And I wonder if I could actually take you to, he said, paragraph 379 on page 6. Okay, I think that paragraph actually runs very, very neatly with a paragraph on the preceding page, 371, which looks at the issues of emotional well-being, mental health and isolation. But this one is perhaps where that comes to a head, and that is an issue of suicide and our actions as an authority in terms of suicide prevention. It's probably the most appalling thing anybody can have to deal with. I've had certainly 2 people, one of whom was a friend of mine, who had to deal with suicide in their family. And I've also had to deal in the past with a colleague, in a sense, in a work situation, who, for no reason at all, decided to commit suicide. Nobody to this day can ever find the reason. Now, we have a suicide prevention plan, and it's referenced in that paragraph. And I read it, and it's straightforward. It deals with all the indicators that we should be looking at, particular signage on areas of hotspot areas like bridges, to look at action plans, to re-establish an early alert system with Cleveland Police, to develop a network of partners and set up information sharing. But I do worry, and I may be wrong here, I do worry that with a lot of the plans that we have, they're in a sense worked on a template provided for them by government agencies. I've seen the template, for instance, for pandemics, which I'm very, very concerned about, which I look forward to a session on Tuesday next where we'll be looking at that issue with the Health and Wellbeing Board. But what I'm coming to on this is that suicide prevention plan appears to be very tees-wide. And what I'm going to suggest, and this is the actual question, is whether we could actually ask through the lead member and the chair and vice chair of the appropriate scrutiny bodies to see whether we could actually look at scrutiny, and I would think that would probably be adult services and children's, to look at some time before the election at the suicide prevention plan, how it works, how it's structured, how effective it is. Does it talk to GPs about signs of stress amongst patients? Does it talk to CAMs? All these kind of issues, which are mentioned here. And I think it would be very, very useful for members, because at the end of the day, this is probably the most horrendous thing that ever happened to a family. And if we can do anything to try and prevent a suicide, we've done a marvellous job for that person, his family or her family, and that community they live in.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Do you wish to respond, Councillor Pallister?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I've actually never, thankfully, had to go through losing anyone through suicide. I cannot imagine the pain that families must go through. But I have known only last year 2 people in my ward that have lost children, young adults, to and it was through drugs, the main issue, and mental health, that they actually committed suicide. And it was just awful to sit with them families. And you know, we all have social media, and you see the constant pain they go through on social media, as well as when you meet them face to face. Anything we can do. I know Edward's very, very passionate. He chairs the suicide reduction group, and he's very passionate about doing all he can. We have seen a reduction, which is great, but I do understand, Councillor Walsh, what you mean by we should have a look at this as elected members and locally within our borough. I think it should be a joint scrutiny, because it would probably go to adults and communities, but because it affects young adults as well, I think we should look at a joint scrutiny committee between children's and adult and scrutiny committee. We do some excellent work through our scrutiny committee, so I'm more than happy to take that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Pallister. I thought that was quite for such a big subject area that you cover. I'm a bit ashamed that we only get a couple of minutes to go through asking you a question on something that you only come to us maybe once a year on with. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing that we're rushed through. Just a couple of things really. I'm hoping that it's relevant to this on the first part, and that is that with the changeover from coast and country to beyond housing, has there been any issues with it since the handover that you're aware of? And in your opinion, have you been kept up to date on everything that, with all the changeover and everything else that you could possibly update us on, just in your opinion, I would imagine, this time round? And also, towards the end of your report, you've got the Feel Good Loftus stuff on there. And I just want to pay tribute to Sharon Bartram, who I feel is an absolute asset to this council. Her work has been absolutely brilliant. She's got herself well stuck in. And I would love to see her promotional material budget increased a bit, so she gets more of a Facebook showing than what she does, even if it's just to promote some of her work. I'm currently working with Sharon to put an event on in Loftus in relation to men's mental health awareness, and it's going to be a sports themed thing in Loftus Club to try and we're going to look to have some speakers there that, you know, we haven't really invited him yet, but hopeful that Bernie Slaven might come along and we can have a bit of a sportsman's dinner, question and answer session, and subtly sort of drop in mental health awareness tips and where they can get information from. For those that don't know, Loftus does have one of the highest rates of deaths in young men from suicide, and that shocks me and it upsets me. I'm sort of in that bracket now, so if you notice any signs with me, please do tell me. You know, I can come talk to you. You know, it's an issue that doesn't really get the necessary promotion that it deserves, and I think, you know, with like I've already said, with the time limits that we get, it doesn't get the time of day to sit and talk about it, when really that's what we should be doing a bit more of. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Pallister, would you like to respond?
Right, can I thank Councillor Davies, and I absolutely agree that all portfolios, you just can't do them justice in 10, 15 minutes. And, you know, we have some important issues to deal with. And I was hoping to actually say a bit more about mental health. I think one of my recommendations, the last time I stood up in council, I recommended that we should have a private rented sector task and finish group, and we did that. We've done some excellent work through that. The one area I think we should look at in this council is mental health, both children and adults. And I think there should be a task and finish group set up, and not take too long to do that, because it's such an important issue and we're not dealing with it in depth. There's some excellent work going on. If you look at page 5, we're doing some really good work in terms of working with school children. We have now more than 18 different providers. There was only 7, there's now 18, and they've all been assessed to ensure that they're delivering the right services into schools. We have the Stepping Up School Transition Programme, and that's for helping children, and it is a pilot, helping children who will find it difficult to transition up to secondary school. We hope that can be rolled out when it's evaluated. Our public health team are looking at leading on the personal social education in schools, and obviously we hope that will impact on young people's health outcomes. But in answer to your question in terms of beyond housing, I think the merge is the right thing for. We've had several. Sorry, I'll say that again. Sorry about this. We've had several information sessions from Coast and Country for members. I don't think there was a lot of members turned up to some of them consultation sessions, but they did give members the opportunity to actually, you know, input into the work of Beyond Housing before the company actually, Coast and Country, actually merged with Yorkshire Coast Homes. It will create an additional, well, there's 400 million now they've merged to be able to spend in places like Loftus and other areas of the borough. I'm confident that it'll make a real difference. I don't think it's it's a step backwards. I think, like we've done with merging our public health services and our single health and wellbeing board, I think merging Yorkshire Coast Homes with Coast and Country will be a positive thing. As you've seen in my report, I thank all volunteers. We just could not do without them. They're a massive asset to this council, this borough, and particularly in this area of public health. I hope we have a feel-good Grangetown, a feel-good in Corton, a feel-good every ward. So I think that's the way that we have to start working more, and that's helping people to help themselves more. And by doing the work that's going on in Loftus, you know, we can learn from that as well across the borough.
Thank you. We're officially out of time, although 10 minutes never seems enough to cover this. Can I reiterate again, can members please, when they're asking questions and replying, be as succinct and as brief as possible? Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment will be brief. It's concerning page 12. You are talking about cervical screening, but you do mention breast screening. I'm not sure whether you're aware or how many people in Redcar and Cleveland Council are aware, but since I came on the council, South Tees Hospital has not been operating an emergency breast screening service. They lost their staff and their radiology about the same time as the last machine packed in. Strange. So currently, it's temporarily still at North Tees, which is extremely fragile because there's a lot of people there, and again, the staff are under pressure. Now, through the joint health, we pursued this, and we were told there was going to be a hub and spoke model. And then it sort of drifted into the ether, and currently it's still at North Tees. We have no proposals, and it's in the air. The difficulty is an international shortage of radiographers. There are ways around that, but we can't get anyone to pursue them. Now, I pointed out the difficulty, and I've known people who have had this difficulty, of in a high-risk situation where you think you've got breast cancer, and you've got to travel from the far ends of East Cleveland to North Tees Hospital, find your way around, park your car. It is horrendous, and I really feel that this council should be putting more pressure to try and get a resolution to this.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Pallister.
In all words, Councillor Watts, thank you for providing that information. I wasn't aware that residents in Redcar and Cleveland were still having to go to North Tees for breast screening. It's unacceptable, and I'll take that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Pallister. Councillor Ian Jeffrey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, drug-related deaths on page 4. I suppose more accurately, they should be described as prescribed drug-related deaths, as opposed to drug-related deaths. And it tells us that there were 37 over that 3-year period. Any death is tragic, obviously, but that amounts to 1 per month. And I just wonder, because the statistics aren't here, I just wonder what the smoking and alcohol-related deaths were in that same period. I suspect they would run into the thousands. And if that data is available, I think I'd like to see it. And I'd like to see us dealing with drugs as an issue from a point of view of health, rather than one of getting people into the criminal justice system. And when Councillor Pallister talks about having a serious adult debate, well, I think we're all in favour of that, aren't we? But every time anyone moots this particular subject for discussion, certainly at government level, it's kicked into the long grass, despite the evidence being presented in terms of a change in policy by any number of Home Affairs Select Committee's reports, generally for a fear of what the Daily Mail and its readership might actually say. So if we can have a serious adult debate, can the councillor give some commitment then to initiating something within this authority? We know what's happening on the ground. I'd like to think we might know what some of the solutions are, and I'd like to think we can make some recommendations to national government about what we think. So could that be another job for our DPH? Councillor Pallister?
Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Pallister again, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Well, yeah, yes, that's one of the reasons why I tried to focus the report on particular areas, and the last one would have been domestic abuse as well. I think that the three key issues that are increasing the numbers of children going into care, which is drug use, alcohol use, mental health and domestic abuse. I've also mentioned in the report the other issues that we have around drug use and drug dealing, and that's all the crime, the antisocial behaviour, the cost to our services and the NHS and public health and police, housing. And yes, it's about time we looked at it from a real public health perspective. We put more resources into it, we got together, we could again have a task and finish group in Redcar and Cleveland to look at this very serious issue that I think a lot of people have buried their heads in the sand, and it's just going on and on and on and increasing. And I also just welcome what Cleveland Police are doing, and I look forward to working with the Police and Crime Commissioner and other partners across South Tees.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the light of page 5, paragraph 3.7.1, where it says it's estimated that 10.4% of children and young people in Redcar and Cleveland have a common mental health disorder, would Councillor Pallister agree with me that our schools really need to make this one of their top priorities, the mental health of their children, that it should be right up there with keeping them safe and teaching them to read and write? There's a new NHS survey of 1,000 children which suggests it might be as high as 1 in 8 now, and within that headline figure there are particular issues. The sexualization of girls is a particular problem, but also your chances are increased if you're LGBT, if you're white British, if you live in a lower income household, if you engage in risky behaviour, or you have a parent with poor mental health, or you're excluded from school. And I think it's particularly in the light of the last one that our schools need to look at themselves, particularly the secondary schools, and particularly in Key Stage 3.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaway. Councillor Pallister.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaway. Yes, I would agree that schools could go further in terms of making mental health a top priority. But I did say in my introductory report, I think we should actually look at this, not just the schools, but as a community. I think we need to, as elected members as well, have a task and finish group to look at mental health both in children and adult services. So yes, I think schools should make mental health a top priority, but I think we all should.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you. It's quite a convenient time for me actually, because I was going to talk on 3.71 and it refers to a common mental health problem. I was wondering what that encompasses, and if something is in a more extreme mental health disorder, and schools are trying to work around this, but often it has been an involvement of CAMS. I wondered if we had any figures for that, or what they really cover, because unfortunately I've had a couple of incidents recently when CAMS, for various reasons, sickness or whatever, have not been able to keep meetings with parents, and it's got to be a joint thing. The schools are their responsibilities, but so have our partner organisations. So I would like a little bit more information on that. And the other one was very briefly on 3.13 on page 9. I heard a report coming into the meeting today about the increase in diabetes in our young children, starting from about maybe 5 or 6 type 2 diabetes. And that's very much linked to diet and exercise, so I welcome any initiatives. But I wonder if we're sort of bearing this in mind, and whether there's other reasons for this rise, or whether it is just about lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pallister.
Well, I'll answer the one with the first question, Councillor Ovens, on diabetes. I'm not from a medical profession, so I can't really go into depth about the reasons, but, you know, we all know that, you know, we've now got the sugar tax. We all know that there's too many young people eating takeaways. They're on the iPads too much, not enough exercise. You know, the lifestyle that you said is a big factor to people who, children and adults, suffering from obesity, which leads to diabetes. I think if I could turn your attention to page 9 and 10, we can see some of the excellent work that's going on. And for me, we just need to do more of this type of work. We need to put more resources into prevention, and that can be, you know, I said at the beginning, 97 billion going into treating obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and yet it's 8 billion and reducing. You know, we're seeing the public health budget reducing. So I can't give you an explanation on all the reasons, you know, that people are suffering with diabetes. It's increasing, but it's definitely a lot down to lifestyle. And these are just some examples on page 9 and 10 that we as a council are doing, and in partnership. There's all the work that we're doing with our community development teams, well, empowering community teams now. So I would just ask, and I did ask Councillor Thompson at the beginning, that I would just ask Councillor Thompson that we actually write to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and we get more money into public health. There is so many issues we need to deal with, and we're not, because we can't.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. Prevention, the old adage, prevention is better than cure. It is. So hopefully we will all adhere to that. I'm very pleased to respond positively to the several invitations that I've had from Councillor Pallister. If we're going to prevent, we must have information out there. So, universal credit, we welcome that. I'm very pleased to see that we are responding positively to putting information out there and to staffing up to provide the resources to be in place over clearly one of the most challenging times of the calendar. But just to make sure we get our information correct, and we welcome as much information as we can have, can we have that on the front page, on the front door of all the libraries? Because if I go to a library and it's closed, I don't want to go away frustrated. I need to know where I can be signposted to. If I'm looking on the council website, there's little red dots that tell me where I can go for information. One of them is Saltburn Lifeguard or Lifeboat Station. Well, pardon? Please look at that. Prevention is better than cure. So, STAR system. Who knows about the STAR system? 2 people, 3 people. Okay? This has been in existence for some 3 years now. It's one of the procedures that Health Watch will advise us that allow people who want to get a GP appointment can get one within 24 hours. So what better system of prevention is there is to impart that information to every resident so that we don't say we can't get an appointment any longer. Let's do something about that. Now, what else can we do? If you go to A&E or any casualty system, you'll get, the first thing you do is you get about 20 questions, wasting their time, wasting your time, because the national database can't be accessed at A&E. What a farce. So prevention, surely we should be making that all data that's available in your surgery is available across the health service. We can do that. Now, I mentioned Health Watch. People may have thought that Health Watch has disappeared off the horizon, and yet is one of the best advocates for picking up on individual residents' concerns. So let's hear more about Health Watch and signpost all those people who have concerns, who can't facilitate those through because no other system allows them to articulate them. Let's hear about Health Watch more and more. Now, we've talked about smoking. How many times have I requested this authority to make it a smoke-free employer? That's prevention. Let's do something about it.
Can you put the questions you want to ask, please, Councillor Thompson?
If you go, I will, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you go to any hospital, it says no smoking. And what do you usually find outside James Cook? A queue of people smoking. Prevent. Do something about it. My last point, Mr. Mayor, is to ask about crime prevention. Now, if we turn, Councillor Pallister, to page 7, we're talking about domestic abuse. I would simply ask that for those people who've not received the November blog from the crime prevention officer, Jerry McBride, that we get hold of this blog and circulate it to every single person who may need it. Because what it says is, this month's blog informs you about Holly Guard, a free smartphone application. If you're in danger, you shake your form, you generate a silent alert. So you can have video, sound, alert.
Sorry,
to where
Councillor
you
Thompson,
are.
that's time.
So all the questions, final sentence, all the questions we ask about domestic abuse can
Sorry, Councillor Thompson.
can in part be
More
addressed.
than 5 minutes, thank you. Councillor Pallister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're all aware, we spoke about this before, about the lack of GPs and the difficulty in getting appointments to GP surgeries. And I know, you know, the reports that we've had through the Health and Wellbeing Board, there's a lot of planning going on to try and attract more GPs, to train GPs up, and hopefully that'll improve. But, you know, this is an issue in Redcar and Cleveland, and probably, you know, in many other boroughs across the country. We are a smoke-free employer. That's already happened. And in terms of you talked about prevention and GPs and getting an appointment. Well, my thoughts on prevention is you don't even have to get to a GP. And if we put more money into public health, we prevent more people going to a GP. So there will be more spaces for people who genuinely need them appointments. So I don't see prevention as just being able to get more GPs and getting a quick appointment. I see it as tackling domestic abuse, tackling mental health, tackling poverty, tackling all the issues we spoke about, ensuring those on universal credit are not worse off, which lone parents and people who've got a severe disability premium will be, and Esther McVie told us, there will be people worse off on universal credit. So let's tackle all these issues. Let's have real debates on the issues that I tried to get through, but obviously I wasn't quick enough in raising them. But in your questions around prevention and the areas that you've spoke about, it's not prevention. Prevention is, we'll write a letter to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and let's see that his comments are put into action. He mentioned about domestic abuse. We've actually had and get a chance to say this, but we've actually had 937 incidents in 3 months. That's not acceptable. We're doing lots of work, and I really do think the work that we've done with the Domestic Abuse Partnership, through the Adult and Children's Safeguarding Boards, and through the PCC Crime Commissioner, and the work through the Community Safety Partnership, all working really well. Definitely improvements in what we're doing for women and children suffering domestic abuse. But it still needs to go further. And if we keep cutting resources, we'll keep seeing more and more issues that we're not dealing with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Councillor Quartermain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a very quick answer to reverse all the cuts to our health and well-being, and that's to have a general election. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Pallister, for your report, and thank you for highlighting the issue on page 8, tackling period poverty, a very real issue for young women, and a very embarrassing one for people in poverty at this moment. Are councillors aware of the Red Box project? I'm not going to repeat what's in the report here, but this is already up and running in Redcar. They can be found very easily on Facebook, and there is a national website. I would urge councillors to encourage businesses to support this project by creating collection boxes and by contributing. And I would particularly ask those councillors that are outside of Redcar as well to get involved with this. I know we've got a project up and running in Redcar at the moment. I'm not sure how far that stretches across the whole of the borough. So can I ask Councillor Pallister to join me in thanking those councillors who have already supported by raising funds and by contributing sanitary products, and to encourage the rest of this chamber to get behind this very, very important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quartermain. Councillor Pallister.
Yeah, of course, I'd like to thank all councillors, and can I particularly thank Councillor Neil Baldwin, because he's really been supportive in the work that we're doing in terms of tackling period poverty, and Chloe and Jasmine, who are the volunteers that set up the Red Box scheme in Redcar, Cleveland. We are supporting Chloe and Jasmine, and we've contacted all the schools. Unfortunately, not all the schools have got back. Those that have got back feel that they are providing sanitary products, but in my opinion, they should be actually there in the girls' toilets, and you shouldn't have to go and ask a teacher for sanitary products, because it's embarrassing, and maybe as a one-off that's fine, but if you're really in period poverty, it's not something you want to do. You need them access to them at all times. So we really need the schools to get more on board, and we thank all the businesses and volunteers that are taking part in tackling this issue. But it's just sad, isn't it, in the report we've got tackling fuel poverty, financial poverty, period poverty, increase in food banks. Last week we were talking about baby banks for people, young mums and mothers-to-be who haven't got the basic essentials when before their unborn child's born. It's just ridiculous in this day and age that we're having discussions about such issues, and I can only thank everyone that gets behind providing help to those that need it most.
Thank you, Councillor Pallister. No more members have indicated. Can I thank Councillor Pallister for her report? Item 9 is to consider motions. There is one motion. Councillor Suja, please.
Yep, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I do have to say it has been a really hard debate that we've had today about a whole range of issues, many of which are driven by the poverty that many of our people live in. And that poverty often comes from working in jobs that either don't give you sufficient hours or pay low wages or don't give you all the conditions that you would hope to have to enable you to bring up your family and look after your family properly. So this motion is very much about us providing some leadership around the whole business of good jobs. It very much builds on the report that went to Cabinet in September, which set out our ambition to use our spending power, the money that the council has, within our local community to maximise the benefit for local people. Make sure we use the money this council has to invest in local businesses and to give benefit to local people. But this motion is about going to the next level. Not just buying local, but buying local from great local employers who provide great local jobs. That's the plan. Now, it's all very well saying that, but we've got to, as a council, to do some of that ourselves as well, haven't we? And as a council, we actually pride ourselves, rightly, I think, in being a good employer. We have no one employed below the Living Wage Foundation for 2018 of £8.75. And in 2019, we intend to increase that to the 2019 rate of £9 next year. We're signed up to the Unison Ethical Care Charter to support and promote higher wages, more training and better conditions in the care sector. Just this week, I was delighted to welcome our new take of apprentices to the council, and I think we have some of the highest numbers of apprentices of any organisation, and I think that's brilliant. We excel at the Tees Valley Better Health at Work Awards, where we've been leading in that whole area. And I'm waiting with anticipation for the outcome of our latest Investors in People assessment. We've currently got gold, and hopefully we're going to do even better than that this time. And you know, that is all evidence of what we do as a council. So we're leading the way, providing good quality employment, I believe, and it's our responsibility to do what we can to make sure all our working residents have access to great jobs too. But the situation, and we've heard the results of the situation, of our labour market here in the North East is not a good situation. And despite headline improvements in employment figures and some limited wages growth, we've seen the least benefit from economic growth anywhere in the UK. And I would just want to say in terms of wages growth, we're still not back to 2008 levels. That's where we are. That's how bad it is. The North East still has the highest proportion of workless households, the highest rate of NEETs, and in our borough, 5.5% of our young people are unemployed. That's double the national figure. So whilst there are more jobs, it's the quality of those jobs that's most important. What we need to make sure is that the people that are in work in our borough are in great jobs, and that's what this resolution is about. So what's the problem we're trying to tackle? Well, our labour market has been through a huge amount of change over recent years. We are seeing more full-time jobs created, as I've said, but we've still got large pockets of 0 hours contracts, bogus self-employment, underemployment, entrepreneurs so-called who really have no choice but to start their own business but earn significantly less than the average. We're also seeing a growth in the gig economy, in temporary work and in the number of agency workers. All of those things result in people not having certainty about the income they're going to bring in from the work that they do. And we only had to watch the mighty Redcar for the stark evidence of what poor work looks like. But there's also a fallacy that better jobs is just about higher level qualifications and managerial type roles. But that isn't the case. That's not what a better job is about. We need to address the quality of employment for all. There's no use increasing productivity, employment, GVA, all those posh things, if the everyday experience of work for the majority of people in this borough remains poor. So poor wages, insecure employment, impacts on family life, and it makes our children less likely to do well at school, and it means we're more likely to have poor health. Again, all those things we've already talked about. So that's what this motion is calling for. It's calling for us, this council, to take a lead, to ask employers in our borough and across the Tees Valley to focus on 6 things. Because looking at pay alone, and there are suggestions that you can just put up pay and that works. That doesn't work because a lot of our companies aren't able to do that. That's too simplistic. Looking at pay alone is too simplistic. And it fails to recognise the other causes of in-work poverty and pressures on our employers. So we've got to champion jobs where people are, yes, paid fairly, work in safe and healthy workplaces, are treated decently, have guaranteed hours so they have certainty, have the opportunity to be represented by trade unions and get the chance to progress at work and to get on in life and their families as well. As the TUC report says that this motion is based on, lots of jobs aren't great jobs. They're rubbish jobs, but they're done by brilliant people who deserve better. As far as I'm concerned, every single person in this borough deserves a great job. Let's pass this motion and let's get out there and do something about it and make sure that we get great jobs for the people of Redcar and Cleveland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Can I, Councillor Norton, are you formally seconding this motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Walsh, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll be very brief. Right at the back of her speech, Sue referred to perhaps crap jobs, but with brilliant people. And I've got to say, from my perspective as the Member for Adult Services, there's no bigger sector in this borough of people delivering brilliant jobs than people delivering adult care. It's one of the biggest sectors in our local economy. It is a growing sector. It is a complex sector, and it has huge personal, social, and humanitarian demands on the people undertaking it. Yet at the same time, it's one of the lowest paid. The National Audit Office, yet another enemy of the government now, along with the UN rapporteur, has said as much. It's an area that desperately needs attention in terms of wages, in terms of job opportunity, in terms of training, in terms of reskilling. Now, we're helping to do a lot of that here by, first of all, uplifting our contracts with the employers to make sure that some of the benefits of uplifting the contracts went to the care employees. And at the supply side, we're working now with the college, with the TUC, and with Job Centre Plus, and the care companies in setting up the care agency at Redcar and Cleveland College, which is now acting as a training body for people entering that profession. I think it is a profession, it's not just a job. It is one sector that desperately needs the kind of ethos, the kind of respect and the kind of pride that should be awarded to other people. It should be awarded to those people in the care industry.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Foggo, please.
Mr. Mayor, having worked since I was 16, I appreciate that the quality of a job is important and also that you enjoy the work. I was lucky in that I have enjoyed all my jobs and gained knowledge and qualifications through them all. I applaud the commitment of our council to providing good jobs for our employees with good employment conditions. The basic principles in this motion are commendable and will promote good jobs in our borough, but we're being asked to support a document blindly without seeing what it contains, i.e. the TUC's Great Jobs agenda. This document is full of commitments, some of which are good, but some introduce restrictive practices on employers, which may cause interruption to their processes and damage production. We do not look after our employees. We do need to look after our employees, but not to the detriment of our businesses, which may affect future expansion. This motion is driven by a national campaign from the TUC. On their website, there's a suggested motion to be presented to council members, and this present motion has verbatim statements taken from the website. I therefore move an amendment to the motion, which removes the support of the TUC document and also removes blatant political statements from a motion which is designed to promote better employment. The amended paperwork is available.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Has everyone had a chance to read the amendment? Okay.
You could discuss this, but on a point of order, this isn't an amendment. It's a new resolution. You can't just introduce a new resolution.
Mr. Mayor, it doesn't specifically mention the words deletion, etc., but as far as I can tell from this, it's essentially the same motion with references to the TUC deleted. So, in my view, that probably would be a valid motion, technically speaking. Valid amendment, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. We've had the opinion of Mr. Newton that this technically is a valid amendment. Everyone's had the opportunity to read the amendment. We will now debate the amendment. With those members wishing to speak on the amendment, please indicate, please. Councillor Jeffrey, who was going to speak on the original motion, do you wish to speak on the amendment, Councillor Jeffrey? You indicated that you wish to speak on the original motion. Your name is still top of the list. Do you wish to speak on the amendment? Okay, thank you. Councillor Walsh, are you wishing to speak on the amendment?
Now, I've got the problem. I didn't quite hear what Steve Newton said at the back here. I mean, I've got to say that I read this as not an amendment, because effectively what it does, it deletes a few sentences here, alters and twists a few words there. It takes out one particular section, but it's a rewriting of the resolution. And if you actually look at what it means, it's a dislike of trade unions, so that comes out. It's a dislike of public bodies actually acting to try and alter employment practices in the private sector, which a Conservative group don't like. I mean, that is natural, that's their politics. But I've got to say that I think this, to me, fails all the tests of being a proper amendment. And I'd like to hear, and as I say, I did not hear what you said earlier, but I'd like to hear that again, at the very least, to see whether your arguments on this stand up to what I see as the problems in this amendment.
What Mr. Newton said was that, having read the proposed amendment, he felt that it was a proper amendment and therefore should be considered and debated as an amendment. And that's the advice I'm receiving from the professional officer, which I will take. Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to speak to the amendment, which seems to be a revision, there's a couple of changes. The first one is the deletion of the first sentence in the original motion, in removing the statement "and in the positive engagement between ourselves and our trade unions in attempting to counter the challenges opposed by government austerity measures." This is merely a statement of fact, Mr. Mayor. There has been positive engagement between the council and the trade unions. There are challenges, and these have been imposed by government austerity measures, measures that the government does not deny it has had to do. The government has had a policy of austerity, which it has publicly admitted. That has caused challenges which nobody of any political strata is denying. Therefore, it's a statement of fact. It may not be a convenient or a comfortable fact for some of those on the opposite side of the chamber, but it is a fact and nothing more. It doesn't materially change the motion, but I don't see why we should remove it just because we don't like the truth. Also, on what was the 5th paragraph of the original motion, and is still the 5th paragraph in the amendment, is taking out the specific mention of the Northern TUC's Great Jobs Agenda. Now, it's a shame Councillor Nightingale isn't here today, because he said how he doesn't like motions being woolly or not having proper specific detail and having vague language. I wouldn't like to speak for him and say he therefore wouldn't like the amendment, but I have a feeling he wouldn't, because the initial reference to the Northern TUC's Great Jobs Agenda is a reference to a specific document with information against which we can measure whether or not this motion would have an effect. Replacing it with the vague wording in the amendment would make the whole thing ineffective. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, I cannot support this amendment just because it's uncomfortable to some and it's lacking in detail.
Thank you, Councillor Dick. Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dick said right. It's statements of facts or opinions, or whichever way you want to look at it. And the amendment Councillor Jeffrey put forward is there, and he's perfectly right and proper. Or the original motion, sorry, is perfectly right and proper. The reason for the amendment, and as Councillor Foggo said, this is part of a national copy. It's been cut and paste, right, from a document sent round by the TUC and pushed onto our agenda. I don't think that's right. I don't think we should do that, but it's there and it's a fact. All the amendment does, or the revision, or whatever you want to call it, is it takes it away from being a political statement and it makes it a statement about what this council will do and how we will go forward. You have the numbers to vote this down. If you choose to vote down this amendment, fine. All you are telling the people of this borough is that the political statement is far more important than the content of the motion you put forward. The choice is yours.
Councillor Quigley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with some of what Councillor Foggo is saying in that the reference to the TUC Greater Jobs Agenda. There's no actual, the document isn't attached to the motion, the original motion. But I think removing any references to it would be a completely wrong thing to do. I've just had a quick browse of what the Great Jobs Agenda is actually encouraging people to do, or businesses to do. And some of those things include paying all workers at least the real living wage, working towards total pension contributions of at least 15% of wages. I think that's particularly useful considering we have an aging population. We've discussed earlier about things like mental health and well-being. One of the proposals in the Greater Jobs Agenda is implementing a policy for workplace well-being. So I agree with the sentiment that the document should have actually been included because it does actually have excellent proposals in it. So I will have to vote against your amendment, and hopefully we'll be able to. I'll still support the original amendment. The original motion as it was presented. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Councillor Watts, please. Councillor Watts.
Thank you. I would support this motion because what we've heard this afternoon is the good work that is going on in this council, in partnerships with all sorts of bodies. I disagree that we should be promoting one particular union view. We're not all members of a union, that union, whatever. I think it diminishes the power we have as individuals in this council. And I think that's the bit that we should be pressing. That's the bit that we should be telling our residents. We have always worked for you, and this is what we intend to do.
Thank you. Councillor Massey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that both the motion and the amendment clearly have a lot of merit in them. The motion and the amendment both say that we as a council want to provide great jobs, and that is a great thing. But I think that the original motion, and this is why I'll be voting against the amendment, goes further. There's been questions raised about the TUC's document. But realistically, what we're telling the people of the borough, to answer Councillor Turner's point earlier on, is that we care about the things in that document, which are things like Councillor Quigley has said, but also the broad themes of that document, which are about having a voice at work, fair and decent pay, regular hours, learning and progression, fair treatment and respect, healthy workplaces. If we accept the amendment, we don't accept those things because they are what are in the document. And I think that we as a council have a responsibility not only to our own staff to make sure that they have great jobs and good pay, but also we have a responsibility to say to the wider population of Redcar and Cleveland that we want other businesses and industry to promote the great jobs agenda and to promote those 7 things that I've just mentioned. So I'll be voting against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I seem to feel like we just sit here and waste our time debating stuff that, you know, has more to do with the politics of Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council than what really matters to the residents of this borough. I thought that we already were a living wage paying council. Yeah. I already thought that we did all the things that were in here for the people that we employ as a borough council. So I'm at a loss as to why we're actually debating this, wasting more time when we could have been carrying on Councillor Pallister's portfolio, to be honest, which had more direct impact, I feel. Now, I haven't decided which way I'm going to actually vote on this yet. I have no qualms voting either way with either of them, just to speed it up. Again, I just think it's a complete waste of our time. Again, I don't know how other people in the chamber feel, but I think there's more important things that we should be dealing with for our residents out there than stuff that comes from a national agency, whatever you want to call it. And this goes for other things as well. I think we had one at the last council meeting as well that was aimed at trying to discredit the other side, and I just think it's a complete waste of our time. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, when I first looked at the Labour Party motion, you know, I really felt I hadn't got much against it, and I still haven't got that much against it. But what annoys me, and you do this at almost every meeting, you lift motions from national documents and such like, instead of being a bit more creative and, you know, thinking up something yourselves, which wouldn't be that difficult, you know, and then you impose what is really a national campaign is hidden within this within your motion, and we don't want to hear about national campaigns. We want to hear about doing something in this borough and what has already been achieved in this borough by the council. So whereas Councillor Fogo's motion focuses on this council's work, yours doesn't. And so for that reason, and because I'm sick of you doing this every meeting to get over national Labour Party and TUC policies, I'm going to say definitely I'm voting for Councillor Fogo's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Jeffrey, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm opposing the motion. For those of you who haven't seen it, that's the TUC's Great Jobs campaign. The TUC is not a party political organisation. It's cross-party. There are many, many millions of union members right across this country who belong to all political parties. And, you know, to characterise it as a Labour Party agenda is just nonsense. To suggest that this council is so insular, it cannot take part in a national campaign of something of this importance is to me completely unbelievable. The fact is that this is a national campaign. This is a resolution that's been passed by a number of councils already in the North East. It's about trying to mobilise nationally to ensure that we improve working conditions for our people in some very insecure, very poorly paid, very bad conditions. They're the real issues, and what the emotion is doing is diverting us away from what are the real issues that are being tackled by this agenda. And, you know, I cannot believe that anyone in this council chamber would not want to support better working conditions for some of the many, many poorly paid people who live in poverty tea, despite the fact that they are in work. And I cannot understand how people would consider this to be either irrelevant or in some way inappropriate because it is part of a national campaign. I think it's disgraceful, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you. I have no more members who have indicated they wish to speak, so go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, would you please show, please? All those against, please? So the amendment is not carried, so we now go back to the original motion. And Councillor Ian Jeffrey, you were top of the list to speak to the original motion. Sorry?
Oh, thank you, yeah. The acoustics is not improved, Steve, I have to tell you, in this council chamber. We did adopt a national campaign resolution not so long ago, if I recall correctly. That was on the Unison Charter for Care Homes, which resulted, I think, in positive improvements in our care homes. So, you know, there's an argument, if you like. And in the original resolution, under the sentence, "in the wider community we will," it tells us we will work with local employers to influence their employment practice, etc., etc. That was the original intention, in some respects, for introducing the Redcar and Cleveland living wage. We wanted to be an example for other people to follow, which was a good thing to do. I'm not sure how well we've succeeded in that particular ambition, but if we can reinforce it, it seems to me that's something we need to do. I've actually got some sympathy for what Councillor Kay said earlier on in his perception of the breakdown of society and the things that you actually listed. You could add a few more things into that, or could have added a few more things into it, the way that hate crime has gone up in this country. I mean, I'll use the single word Brexit to demonstrate the breakdown and division that's occurred, but that's a whole separate debate. We've got this county lines phenomenon with drugs. We've got this rising problem of violent crime, and particularly in the metropolitan areas, the use of knives, which nobody can seem to understand. What we know, and this is a fact, there are more people in poverty and work now than are actually on benefits. And the government's mantra, of course, or its justification for austerity, is that people are better off in work than they are on benefits. Well, generally speaking, that would be good. But what's the point in people leaving benefits to go into jobs that don't pay anywhere near what the benefits are? It's not that benefits are too high, it's the wages are too low. And out of that, you build a whole lot of dissatisfaction. I mean, another fact, apparently, is that the current generation of young people are going to be worse off than their parents. And generally speaking, since the end of the Second World War, that has improved generation on generation. So that in itself is going to breed a lot of dissatisfaction. And I just wonder, in the wider context, because, you know, it's all very well passing this resolution and having criticisms or others otherwise about the TUC, but if we don't have an educated citizenry with skills, we're not going to get the jobs that people would want to have to improve their lives and those of the children. And I just wonder if anybody's watching the programme on BBC Two on a Tuesday night, 6 one-hour programmes, and it's called Simply School. And it's following an academy trust somewhere else in the country of 5,000 pupils. And they're desperate because they can't cope with the cuts that are being inflicted on the school. They've cut out all the pastoral support. They've cut the number of teachers. They've taken allowances off them, and they've given them more work to do. And guess what? The teachers are leaving. And they're bringing in supply teachers that cost even more. The kids in some areas of the school are running crazy all over the place, but what they're not doing is getting educated. And of course, when Ofsted comes in, as they do infrequently, because we all know, don't we, the more you get inspected, the better your performance is going to be, isn't it? When Ofsted comes in, they're not interested in the human aspects. All they want to see is statistics. And this is a spoiler alert, by the way. On Tuesday's programme, the head teacher got the boot. So the next 3 episodes are going to be pretty sad, I would think, because they'll have to try and get another one now. Next week, I'm going to what is grandly called the Schools Forum on your behalf. I'm the single elected member on that. I'm allowed to speak, but I'm not allowed to vote, and it's basically where the head teachers go and carve up their delegated budget. And I've been on that a couple of years, and it's really interesting to be there. Head teachers at the moment don't know where to turn in this borough. They're particularly concerned about the impact of austerity on kids with special educational needs and disabilities. They can't see a way forward. They're facing more cuts. And guess what? Next week, the meeting is going to start an hour earlier because we've got a guest speaker from the DFE to introduce their new finance tool for schools to use to get more out of the money they're trying to spend or not spend.
Yeah. Can you sum up, please,
I'll leave it to your
Jeffrey?
imaginations as to what the reaction from the head teachers is going to be to that piece of advice.
Thank you. Councillor Lanigan, please.
Mr. Mayor, when I read this motion, I don't have an issue with it. What I had an issue with it, I don't know what the TUC paper was about, and it would have been better had you put a summary in there. What I want to say is Redcar and Cleveland Council should be absolutely proud of what they've done with the staff and their pay and everything else. That's fantastic. But what we've got to look at here, we have a great deal of small businesses running right through Redcar and Cleveland and beyond our borders that affect our residents. And what I'm actually seeing out there is that some of these small businesses cannot afford to pay the wages that Redcar and Cleveland Council are paying. So we've got some conflict out there. And until the economy lifts, that the businesses can afford to pay these wages through the care sector and everything else, then our residents out there are not going to benefit from this motion that you've put forward, no matter how much you applaud it. That if we haven't got the economy to lift it, then they won't be able to do that. We've done that as a council, and every single one in this chamber should be absolutely proud of that. But the fact is that, as I said, there's a lot of the small businesses can't do that. It's a good motion. I would have liked to see what the TUC said, and I would have liked to see the body of that to go forward with that. But we've got to remember we're in the real world at the moment, and there isn't the money from our businesses to pay people, and I'm quite sure that they want to. But it's financial times we've got at the moment, it's unrealistic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No more members have indicated to speak. Would you like to sum up, Councillor Jeff?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think I said right at the outset that this wasn't just about wages, because I think it's really important that it's not just about wages, because we do have lots of smaller companies who will find it difficult to just put up wages. And, you know, Councillor Walsh gave us the example of the care sector, where that's a really difficult issue. And so what we try and do in the care sector is find other ways to support good employment by providing training, by supporting them to, you know, provide better terms and conditions when they're at work, those sorts of things. And this agenda is very much about, not just about paying more, because I think that is very simplistic and not a good way of going about it, although some local politicians have been shouting for that recently because they have completely no understanding of the current jobs market. But it should be about fair pay. It should be about a safe and healthy workplace. That doesn't cost money. That's just the way you treat your employees. It's about being treated decently. Again, that doesn't cost money. That's about the way you support your employees. Guaranteed hours. Is it really too much in this day and age to know how many hours you're going to work from one week to the next? So many of our people don't know how many hours they're going to work. They don't know whether they're going to have the money to be able to feed their families. You know, that's the reality, guaranteed hours. To have the opportunity to be represented by unions, that's not imposing unions on a workplace. That's giving people the opportunity. That's a right that has been available to workers in this country for goodness knows how long now. And to get the chance to progress at work and to get on in life. How on earth can that be a bad thing to want to do? So the Great Jobs Agenda is not a straitjacket. It's not an attempt to tell employers what to do. It's about a partnership and leadership from this council showing how it has managed to do stuff, but working with our employers to try and ensure that we provide those better terms and conditions, including wages, but those better terms and conditions across the borough. It doesn't say you must do this by when. It says, look, here's some opportunities. Let's work together to see how we do this. And I would just remind everybody, when the living wage was introduced, how many years ago now was that? Can somebody tell me? What were all the scare stories then about the living wage? You know, the whole of industry would collapse. Nobody'd be able to pay it. We wouldn't be able to manage it. Nothing could be further from the truth. The exact opposite is the case. If we want to increase productivity, if we want to make our economy grow, if we want to give our people good lives, then this is the sort of agenda we need to adopt. And, you know, I make no apologies for wanting us to be part of a national campaign, and I really do think that everyone in this council chamber should vote for this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. We'll now go to the vote on the original motion. All those in favour, please. Okay. All those against, please. Okay, the motion is carried. Item 10 is to appoint members to bodies. There is one change, that is for Councillor Brown to replace Councillor Cawley on Sir William Turner's hospital outside body. Is everyone in favour? Sorry?
The last item for Councillor Brown to replace Councillor Crawley. This year, outside bodies were given to a main vote. And that's how Councillor Crawley obtained this voluntary position. If she wants to change it, surely it should go back to a vote.
Can Councillor Watts repeat her point, please?
Yeah, could you repeat that? We didn't pick everything up, Councillor Watts, sorry.
This year was brought in that these outside bodies, most of them, we voted ourselves as members for representatives on there. And obviously, Councillor Crawley was voted on for the Sir William Turner's hospital. I don't believe in that setup she could give the appointment to somebody else. It would need to come back here for a vote.
It's here now for a vote, Councillor Watts. That's the proposed appointment, so it's here for a vote from full council today.
Willing to stand. It should be other candidates can stand in as well. She can't actually put the other candidate up.
If there are other candidates, then they could be nominated, Councillor Watts. I don't believe there have been any, but if there are other nominations, then they can be considered.
We're nowhere near the date for selection of candidates. There's a statutory timetable for that. There could be arguments about placements at that point, but we're not anywhere near it.
There's a vacancy arisen on the outside body, so we need to appoint a replacement, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to rule. I accept perhaps what Councillor Watts says, but I think we're being a bit pedantic now about appointing. We can go to the vote for Councillor Brown to replace Councillor Cawley. All those in favour, please. Okay, carried. Thank you very much. We have one question from...
Mr. Mayor. For the avoidance of future doubt, could we ensure that the protocols for replacements are followed?
Whatever they might be.
Okay. Can we go on to the last item on our agenda, which is questions from members of the council? There is one question. Councillor Watts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And can I just remind Councillor Watts, 2 minutes for the original question and 1 minute for supplementary.
At a recent resources scrutiny meeting, John Sampson was explaining that the decision of China not to take our waste meant a considerable rethink. On another issue, John Sampson talked about the international problem of plastic waste. I asked whether the officers had looked into the recent successful trial of using plastic waste to resurface roads and to fill in potholes. It takes all sorts of plastic, and the trial has been successful. John Sampson was not aware of the trial and advised me to consult with Mike Green. Mike also informed me that he was not aware of the trial but would consult his officers. I heard nothing, and so I copied a newspaper article about the trial which took place in County Durham. The council's surfacing contractor, Rainton Construction, sources the plastic from a Scottish company, McReber Limited, who has developed a process of turning plastic packaging and insulation into a plastic crumb, which can be mixed into asphalt. I sent a copy of this article to both John Sampson and Mike Green, but have heard nothing since. My question is, why does this council not look to new ideas which may save them money? Can Councillor Norton tell me if this idea has been explored by the officers, and can the costings be produced to the resources scrutiny for consideration?
Thank you. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I want to raise an issue, if I might, before I respond to Councillor Watt's question. I'm concerned, Mr. Mayor, that we are openly criticising officers in a question to full council, when those officers do not have an opportunity in this chamber to represent themselves and make comment as appropriate. And I would urge you as Mayor, along with the monitoring officer, going forward, to review these questions before they get into circulation, such that they meet a criteria that does not unnecessarily disadvantage either the questioner or anybody else mentioned in that report who is unable to respond for themselves.
To the council as a last resort. This first arose at a meeting with myself and Mike Green and one of the other officers in April, and I cannot get a reply to them. What else can I do?
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Norton, would you please reply?
Well, we could debate that for a long time, and I'll speak to Councillor Watts when the opportunity arises outside of this chamber. But I can say, having spoken to the officers, they did indeed reply to you, Councillor Watts. And but nonetheless, I'm quite happy to address some of the questions that you raised, because there is more than one. In relation to the tarmac, you're absolutely right. There have been some trials conducted by a Scottish company in the use of plastic pellets mixed with asphalt to reduce the amount of bitumen needed to tie the product together before it's laid on the surface. It's not new. They may have brought it into the United Kingdom and better developed it. Using plastics in road surfaces has been around on the subcontinent of India for a long, long time. So, you know, I just want to give those people credit for having done it long before we did. And the product referred to is being used now again in India, the United Kingdom, and more recently in America. However, I did a little bit of reading up on this, because I became concerned that plastics and recycling certain plastics isn't always achievable. And I read a report by Dr. Carl Williams, a leading academic at the University of Lancashire, who says that currently the trials on this material are proving, as they say, to reduce the amount of bitumen needed in the use of tarmac, and of course add to the longevity of the road surface. However, he is concerned, and I'm not here to question him, that there is a possibility that the leaching of chemicals that will be emitted from the road surface as it heats up with traffic on it, and indeed the laying down of the surface, whether there is any material being released from that that might harm those people that lay it down, and B, of course, leaches into the surface. Regardless of which, the issue remains that when the tarmac at some point has to come up, then it's now contaminated with plastics, and therefore it too has to be treated in a special way, a way that has yet not been established. We in this borough have a framework agreement along with other boroughs in resurfacing and repairing our roads, and that is with tarmac ultimately. They are meeting with the product suppliers on plastics on the 4th of December to discuss that product. So it isn't simply a question of Redcar and Cleveland saying, please use plastic asphalt on our roads. It's something that has to be agreed within the framework agreement and adopted by all the councils that share that framework agreement. Your second question was, does this council not look to new ideas which may save them money? Well, the answer is a very positive yes, Mr. Mayor. And I'll mention a few of the schemes. The purchase and conversion of Hills View Nursing Home to be used in an intermediary care centre so that we can take the strain of hospitals and bed blocking that takes place there, a reduced cost to the NHS. The purchase of a refurbishment Church View house in Kirkleatham that will provide respite care to those who care for young people with complex needs. All of these will save money. The wildflower seeding of our borders and our roundabouts recently, so that we don't have to cut the grass as often and spend money on traffic management schemes while we do it. Another money-saving idea. The introduction of LED lighting across the borough that will save us in the region of £4 million per annum in our electricity bill going forward. Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do innovate to save money in this authority. Can the costings associated with recycled plastics in tarmac be produced to resources scrutiny? As and when they're available, I see no issue with that, Councillor Watts, and like you, I would like to see them when they do come out of the system. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. Do you have a supplementary question? 1 minute, Councillor Watts.
Yes, I was going to say, have we got our head in the sand? But you've actually quoted one of the things I had written down, the street lighting initiative. Refurbishments are all very well, but new initiatives I think need exploring. I'm not saying do this plastic, but we have a problem with plastic. This was an idea that came up, and I think at least the officers should have responded to me, which they didn't, and I think it should be brought to resources scrutiny for discussion. We all need to talk about this, good points and bad points, before we just write it off as a professor who says it, it causes problems. I mean, it's been on Country File, it's been on other programs. They didn't raise that particular issue. Other people may raise other issues. But if we don't look into it, we don't know what the good and the bad is. And I think our officers should be looking for initiatives and should be bringing them for discussion.
Thank you.
Chair, because I think it's worth me commenting and saying the officers have not written it off, neither have I written it off. A meeting takes place on the 4th of December with the people who supply the tarmac Adam for the road surfacing in this authority and others to see whether or not they can adopt that new material.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes our meeting. Can I just remind members there are festive refreshments and the light switch on outside this building will be taking place shortly and at 6:30 in the High Street if you're still around. Thank you very much.